Long before our stories were carved into stone, before ink ever touched parchment, worlds rose and fell like the tides beneath an unseen moon. Civilizations breathed, dreamed, and vanished, leaving behind only whispers buried in sand, drowned beneath oceans, or hidden in myths we call legends. How many times has our world begun again? How many times have we built cities of light, only to watch them fade into shadow? Tonight, let us wander through the remains of forgotten ages, from drowned temples to silent deserts, from crumbling empires to cities swallowed by time. Not with fear, but with gentle wonder. For this is not a tale of endings, but of beginnings that refuse to die. Close your eyes, breathe softly, and listen. This is the story of how many times civilization has been reset. In this quiet hour, we will travel far beyond recorded history, to the fragile edges where memory meets myth. Historians once believed civilization began only once, along the rivers of Mesopotamia. But new discoveries are challenging that certainty. Stone pillars older than the pyramids, sunken ruins beneath the sea, and ancient maps that trace lands we have no record of. Were these the echoes of worlds that rose before our own? Tonight, you will discover the stories of civilizations that flourished and then fell into silence. The builders of lost cities beneath the sands. The empires undone by famine, fire, and forgotten skies. The cultures erased not by war, but by time itself. Some collapses were sudden, a single volcanic breath, a single failed harvest. Others were quiet, a slow unraveling of order, until the last storyteller forgot the words. Yet, with every fall, humanity learned to rise again. New hands lifted old stones. New voices rekindled ancient songs. So lie back, breathe softly. Tonight, we will walk gently through the ruins of time. And as the stars will quietly above, we will ask, not in fear, but in wonder, how many times has civilization been reborn? Our journey begins now. Imagine a time with no clocks, no kings, no roads, and no written words. Just firelight, cold nights, and people staring up at the stars, wondering where they came from and where they were going. This was Earth before history wrote its first sentence. Before anyone kept records. Before any of the great cities of stone or marble ever existed. Most of what happened back then is gone. No journals, no maps, no carved monuments telling us who ruled or who dreamed. Only bones, tools, and quiet mysteries left in the ground. For thousands of years, humans lived in small groups. They walked across wide grasslands, deep forests, icy valleys. They hunted, gathered berries, tried not to get eaten by bears, and probably complained about the weather just like us. They didn't build cities. They didn't farm. They didn't stay in one place long enough to invent taxes or neighbors. But something changed. Slowly at first. People started doing unusual things. They buried their dead with beads, shells, and flowers. They carved strange little figures of animals and gods. They built stone circles that pointed to the stars. Something inside them whispered, maybe life is more than just surviving. On a quiet hill in what is now Turkey, a place called Göbekli Tepe was found. At first glance, it looks like old stones. But it's more than 11,000 years old. That makes it older than farming, older than pottery, older than the pyramids. Huge stone pillars stand in circles, carved with lions, vultures, snakes, foxes. It wasn't a village, no homes, no farms. It was a temple, a sacred place. That's confusing, because for a long time historians thought people only built temples after they built villages. But this place breaks the rules. It's like humans dreamed of gods before they dreamed of bread. Then comes a bigger question. What if people built even more before this? What if there were civilizations before the last ice age, washed away, forgotten? Around 12,800 years ago, something big happened to Earth. The planet suddenly got cold again. This period is called the Younger Dryas. Ice returned. Animals like mammoths disappeared. People struggled to survive. Some say a comet hit. Others blame melting glaciers messing with the oceans. Whatever happened, it changed everything. If humans had started something like a small civilization, maybe it ended there. Maybe nature hit reset. It's not proven, of course. No flying machines or giant cities have been found from that time. Just hints, like sunken ruins off the coast of India, or lost lands like Doggerland that once connected Britain to Europe before being swallowed by the sea. Imagine waking up and your home is gone, now under ocean water. As the ice melted, sea levels rose. Villages vanished beneath the waves. But humans didn't give up. They started planting seeds. Not because farming was trendy, but because chasing deer every day gets exhausting. Farming meant staying in one place. Staying in one place meant villages. Villages meant rules, and someone to break them. But even before farms or temples, humans had something powerful: stories. They sat by fires, under cold night skies, and told tales. Stories of spirits, storms, great animals, and long winters. No books, just memories, passed from mouth to ear, like a candle passed from hand to hand. Some of those stories may have been memories of real disasters. Floods that covered the land. Skies dark with ash. Winters that didn't end. These stories became myths. Maybe that's where the story of Atlantis came from. Not a real place, but a memory of a world drowned by rising seas. Early humans weren't just hunters. They were artists and thinkers. They painted deep inside caves, bison, horses, stars. Some of these paintings are over 30,000 years old. They made jewelry from teeth and shells. They played music on flutes carved from bird bones. They probably danced badly, too. But life wasn't perfect. People made mistakes. Fires raged. Animals vanished forever. Some groups disappeared without a trace. Progress wasn't a straight line. It moved forward, then backward, then forward again. It's easy to think these early people were simple. But think about it. They survived ice ages. They crossed oceans in wooden boats with no GPS, no maps. They studied the stars without telescopes. They carved temples before they built villages. They knew which plants healed and which ones could kill you with a bad soup. So, did civilization begin only once? Or did it begin, fall, and begin again? Maybe small civilizations rose before the great ones we know. Maybe they fell to cold, hunger, flood, or time. No one wrote their names. No one carved their kings into stone. They just faded, like footprints in the rain. But humans are stubborn. Every time we fall, we stand up again. New hands carved stone. New eyes watched the stars. New voices told the old stories. So the beginning of our journey isn't about kings or pyramids or empires. It's about quiet starts. About people watching sunsets and thinking, what if? It's about cold mornings, warm fires, and ideas slowly waking up inside the human mind. And this is where our story truly begins. With simple people and simple tools and big dreams. With the first sparks of civilization. Small, fragile, and beautiful. Take a breath now. Let it all sink in. The world was just beginning to remember itself. Next, we walk to the land between rivers, where the first cities will rise. They say all stories have a beginning. For civilization, many believe it started in a place where two great rivers hugged the land, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Today we call it Iraq. Back then, there were no countries, no borders, only mud, rivers, and people trying to figure out how not to die in the sun. The land was strange, dry and hot, but the rivers flooded just enough to make the soil rich. So people stayed. They built little huts from reeds and mud. They planted seeds, wheat and barley. At first, it was small and quiet. But small and quiet things have a way of growing. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Before long, there were walls, marketplaces, temples, and probably someone already charging tax for using the well. This place would be called Sumer. The Sumerians were clever. They dug canals to move water across dry land. They built bricks out of river mud and sun. They didn't have stone or wood, but they worked with what they had. Soon, temples rose like staircases to the sky. These were the ziggurats. Big, flat-topped pyramids made not for pharaohs, but for gods. At the top of these temples, priests would whisper prayers, offer bread, fruit, maybe a goat. They believed gods controlled everything, the rain, the crops, even whether or not your sheep ran away. So people listened to the priests. They held power, not swords. But with more people came more problems. Farmers brought grain. Craftsmen made pots. Traders brought shiny stones from faraway mountains. Someone had to keep track of all this stuff. Imagine one tired man sitting in a corner, trying to remember who brought 12 goats and who owes 5 bags of barley. He probably said, "There must be a better way." And there was. They started making marks on wet clay. Little pictures at first, a picture of grain, a picture of sheep. Over time, the pictures became symbols. And just like that, writing was born. Not for poetry, or love letters, or stories about heroes. No. The first writing in history was basically ancient receipts. But soon, writing grew. They wrote laws, stories, myths. One of them became famous, the Epic of Gilgamesh. It told of a king who searched for immortality, got tired, and learned to accept being human. Relatable, honestly. Cities like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash rose from the earth. Some had tens of thousands of people. They built walls to protect themselves. They formed armies. And of course, they argued. About water. About land. About who stole whose goat. Humans, being humans. Life in Sumer wasn't all dusty misery. People brewed beer. They played board games. They sang. They built the first known schools, where kids learned to write by pressing reed pens into clay. If they messed up, the teacher would probably whack them with a stick. So, school hasn't changed much. But no civilization lives in sunshine forever. Around 2200 BCE, things started to fall apart. The rains stopped. The rivers dried. Farming failed. People went hungry. Some left their homes to find food. Others fought for the last bits of water. Sumer began to crack like dried clay. Then came the outsiders, the Amorites, the Gutians, later the Akkadians. People from the north and west who saw a weak Sumer and thought, why not? Cities were invaded. Kings were pushed aside. Statues fell. Temples burned. To make it worse, the soil itself was dying. Sumerians used river water to farm, but the water carried salt. Over time, the salt stayed in the soil. Crops got weaker. Wheat stopped growing. Barley hung on for a while, like a tough old grandma, but even that began to fail. The great city of Ur collapsed. Famine spread. People abandoned the temples they once believed would last forever. The first great civilization of humankind began to fade. But here's the twist, it didn't vanish completely. Because unlike the people before them, the Sumerians left behind something precious: writing. Clay tablets. Thousands of them, buried for thousands of years, waiting. Their words told future people how they lived, how they prayed, how they argued, how they cried. They left recipes, poems, business lists, laws, and dramatic curses like, "May your crops rot and your sheep run backward." Their world fell, but their memory didn't. Later civilizations, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, built on Sumer's bones. They copied their writing, their gods, their cities, their stories. Gilgamesh survived. The ziggurats remained, quiet against the horizon. So, was this a reset? In a way, yes. Sumer rose from mud, touched the heavens, then dried and cracked under the sun of time. But unlike forgotten worlds before it, this one whispered, "We were here." Civilization did not start again from nothing. Someone picked up a clay tablet, read the marks, and remembered. And that is how humanity moved forward, not by keeping everything, but by refusing to lose everything. Take a slow breath. Imagine the warm wind over the old rivers, the sound of reeds brushing against shallow water, the last smoke rising from temple fires. This part of the world still remembers. From here, our journey moves to another ancient land, where the river floods, the sand glows gold, and stone kings watch over the desert. But for now, rest your eyes. The past is patient. Long before the pyramids became the symbol of Egypt, the land along the Nile was quiet, stretching out under endless skies. The river flowed like a ribbon of life through deserts that were otherwise empty and harsh. For thousands of years, people had lived here, learning when to plant and when to harvest, watching the stars, and hoping the river would never fail them. The Nile was more than a river. It was time itself. Each year it flooded, leaving rich soil behind. Without it, the desert would swallow everything. With it, life thrived. People built their lives around its rhythm. They planted wheat and barley, raised cattle, and fished in the green waters. Villages formed on its banks. And slowly, one of the greatest civilizations on earth began to emerge. At first, they were simple. Mud brick homes, small communities, little else. But they had ambition, patience, and an eye for organization. They noticed patterns, the way the river rose, the way the sun returned, the way the stars moved across the night. They worshipped these patterns, building temples, shrines, and statues for gods who seemed to control everything: the sun, the moon, the river, and even life itself. The Old Kingdom rose around 2700 BCE. This was Egypt at its first great height. Pharaohs, believed to be gods on earth, ruled the land. They commanded armies, oversaw the building of massive structures, and kept order. And then they decided to build the pyramids. Now, think about that for a second. Thousands of people moving huge stones without cranes, trucks, or Instagram. They did it because they believed in immortality, in life after death. They carved their names, their dreams, and their legacies into stone, hoping to be remembered long after their bodies were dust. Life wasn't perfect, of course. There were famines, minor rebellions, and probably the occasional pharaoh who yelled at the wrong priest. But mostly, life revolved around the river, the sun, and the pyramids, all of which seemed eternal. And for a while, it seemed they might be. But nothing lasts forever. Around 2180 BCE, the Old Kingdom began to crumble. The Nile's flooding became unpredictable. Crops failed. Famine spread. Central power weakened. Provincial governors grew stronger, and the pharaohs lost authority. The once mighty pyramid builders could barely feed themselves. It was the first intermediate period, a time historians sometimes call dark, though it wasn't completely dark. People still lived, farmed, traded, and worshipped. But the grand organization of the Old Kingdom was gone. Cities shrank. Temples were neglected. Stories of powerful pharaohs faded. It must have felt like the world was forgetting itself. And yet, even in these quiet years, the human spirit didn't vanish. People adapted. They survived. They told stories around fires, whispered prayers in small shrines, and passed down skills from father to child. The river still flowed, even if the kings no longer ruled. After a few centuries, Egypt began to rise again. The Middle Kingdom emerged around 2050 BCE. Order returned. Irrigation projects revived the land. Trade expanded. Art and literature flourished. Pharaohs once again commanded respect, but they were smarter this time. They listened more, built for the people, and left behind writings that celebrated daily life as much as divine authority. Civilization had been reset, but it learned from the first collapse. What's interesting is how Egypt survived multiple resets. Even after invasions, famines, and weak rulers, the core of their society remained intact. Why? Partly geography. The desert isolated them. The Nile nurtured them. But also partly culture. They valued knowledge, order, and continuity. Even when everything seemed lost, they kept records, stories, and rituals alive. They understood that civilization is not only buildings and kings, but also memory, culture, and shared belief. Think about the Egyptians painting on tomb walls. They captured everyday life, boats on the Nile, farmers in the fields, children playing. Those images weren't just decoration. They were a way to preserve a world that could disappear. And sometimes it did disappear, only to return with a new generation, new rulers, and renewed hope. Of course, not every change was gentle. Invasions came, from Hyksos to Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, and eventually Greeks and Romans. Each wave reshaped the land. Cities burned. Temples fell. Knowledge was lost. And yet, like a reed in the river, Egypt bent but did not break. Its culture flowed onward, carrying traces of all that had come before. There's a lesson in that. Civilization can reset, yes, but it does not vanish entirely. The ideas, the stories, the rituals, they are harder to destroy than bricks and mortar. Even when the world seems chaotic, continuity exists in subtle ways. Someone still remembers the old ways, tells a story, or tends the fields. And eventually, civilization rebuilds itself, sometimes stronger, sometimes wiser. And so, as we lie quietly here, imagining the golden sands and the flowing river, we can picture people thousands of years ago, watching the Nile rise, building their homes, praying to gods they could not see. They faced famine, chaos, and collapse. Yet they persisted, leaving behind temples, tombs, and stories that still speak to us. Their lives remind us that reset is not always the end. Sometimes it is just a pause, a breath, a chance to start again. The river rises and falls. People rise and fall. But memory, culture, and spirit flow onward, like the Nile itself, relentless, patient, and quietly eternal. So take a slow breath. Imagine the warm sun on mud brick walls. Hear the laughter of children by the river, the clatter of clay pots, the soft chant of priests in temple halls. Civilization may falter, but it does not disappear completely. And just as the Nile returns every year, so too will humans rebuild, imagine, and create again. Next, our journey will take us to the mysterious Indus Valley, where cities were laid out with remarkable order, yet vanished almost without a trace. But for now, rest. Let the Nile carry you gently toward dreams. Long before maps showed borders, before countries were even a thought, there was a land watered by two great rivers, the Indus and the now silent Sarasvati. Here, in what is today Pakistan and northwest India, a civilization grew that would puzzle the world thousands of years later. The Indus Valley Civilization, also called Harappan, was something extraordinary. Cities were planned like grids, streets laid out straight and precise, houses with bathrooms and drains. Yes, actual drains, the ancestors of our modern plumbing. No mud everywhere, no waste running in the streets. People had public baths, wells, and warehouses. It was clean, organized. Some might say they were a little obsessed with neatness, kind of the ancient world's Marie Kondo moment. Life in the Indus Valley was based on farming. Wheat, barley, peas, and cotton grew in abundance. They domesticated animals and traded goods along the rivers and even long distance with Mesopotamia. Imagine carrying beads, jewelry, and spices over hundreds of miles without trucks or trains, just people, carts, and patience. Somehow, they managed it. Somehow, they kept records of it, in tiny symbols on clay tablets. But the symbols are still undeciphered today. So, we know they wrote, but we don't know exactly what they said. Maybe receipts, maybe poetry, maybe complaints about a neighbor who left a goat in your yard. The cities, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, were thriving. People lived in multi-story homes, wore jewelry, and played games. They traded, farmed, built, and dreamt. And yet, despite all this sophistication, the civilization disappeared almost silently. No invasion, no massive fire, no epic battle written in history books. Just gone. Streets emptied. Houses abandoned. Clay seals and pots left behind like forgotten postcards. So what happened? Scholars have ideas. One is that the rivers shifted. The mighty Sarasvati dried up. The Indus changed its course. A city that depended on water cannot survive without it. Crops failed. People moved. Another idea is climate change, long droughts that slowly starved the land. Some think there might have been floods, sudden and violent. Maybe a combination of all of these. The collapse didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like the tide pulling sand from the shore. And as people left, memory faded. Temples decayed, houses crumbled. By the time outsiders arrived centuries later, these cities were ruins, swallowed by grass and mud, their stories almost forgotten. Yet, even in disappearance, the Indus Valley left hints of brilliance. The planning of their cities influenced later urban settlements. Their art, small figurines of animals and humans, pottery, and beads, inspired generations. Even today, archaeologists uncover streets and granaries that feel almost futuristic for their time. And still, those undeciphered symbols tease us, a puzzle from a civilization that wanted to be remembered, maybe quietly, maybe not at all. It's humbling to think about. Civilization doesn't always leave a loud mark. Sometimes it whispers. The Harappans built, thrived, and faded, leaving behind only traces, clay seals, tiny sculptures, and neat streets under the mud. They remind us that human ingenuity can flourish anywhere, yet even the most advanced societies are fragile. Rivers change. Rainfall falters. Even the smartest people can be undone by forces they cannot control. And yet, like all civilizations, something survived. People moved east and west, taking knowledge, tools, and perhaps ideas of city planning with them. Even if we can't read their writing, the evidence of their thought, organization, and art flows into the human story like a quiet river. Civilization, once lost, often flows again. Imagine walking through Mohenjo-Daro at its height. Dusty streets, the smell of fresh baked bread, children running to the river to play. Merchants calling out their wares. Priests performing rituals to the gods of water and sky. Life continued in routine and wonder. Then, imagine the silence after they left. Empty streets. Houses with doors wide open, pots still on tables. The city sleeps forever, swallowed by time, waiting for someone to remember. There's a strange beauty in that. Not all resets are violent. Some are quiet, slow, almost invisible. But even when a civilization disappears, it can leave behind lessons, ideas, and inspiration. Like a soft echo in a cave, waiting for future humans to hear it. And so, as we lie quietly, drifting with our thoughts, imagine the Indus Valley. Streets perfectly aligned, people living thoughtfully with water and earth. And then, step back in time and watch as they slowly leave, leaving their wisdom and their mysteries behind. They remind us that civilization is not just buildings and rulers. It is creativity, order, and the ability to dream, even in silence. The Indus Valley was a civilization that seemed to vanish without a trace, yet it is very much alive in our imagination. Its cities may have been abandoned, but their legacy flows through history. A silent reminder that human ingenuity, even when forgotten, never disappears entirely. Take a deep breath. Picture the sun glinting off baked clay walls. Hear the faint sound of a river flowing past the city gates. Imagine children laughing, merchants haggling, and the soft clatter of pots. And then, the quiet. The gentle, patient quiet of a world that once thrived, and now waits in memory. From here, our journey will take us to the Bronze Age collapse, where multiple civilizations across the world fell almost at once. But for now, rest in the calm of a city that once was, and think of the resilience hidden in humanity's early footsteps. Across the ancient world, something strange happened around 1200 BCE. Cities that had thrived for hundreds of years suddenly crumbled. Trade networks that once stretched for thousands of miles collapsed. Palaces were burned. Roads were abandoned. It was as if the world hit the reset button almost all at once. Historians call this period the Bronze Age collapse. It didn't happen everywhere at the same time, and nobody left a note explaining why. That's the mysterious part. In the eastern Mediterranean, civilizations like the Mycenaeans in Greece, the Hittites in Anatolia, and the Canaanite cities along the Levant coast faced massive destruction. Egypt survived, but even it felt the pressure. Population declined, economies shrank, and people moved away from old centers of power. Some settlements disappeared entirely, leaving only ruins and empty streets for centuries. Trade had connected all these civilizations. They exchanged goods, ideas, and sometimes gossip, probably the ancient equivalent of, "Did you hear what happened in Mycenae?" When trade slowed or stopped, resources vanished. Copper, tin, grain, pottery, and luxury items became scarce. Cities that depended on imports struggled to survive. Without trade, even kings couldn't maintain their palaces. And the palaces fell. There are several theories about why it all collapsed. One is climate change, long droughts that caused crops to fail and rivers to dry. People might have starved slowly while the kings still argued about who owned what. Another is invasions by mysterious groups called the Sea Peoples, who swept along the Mediterranean coast, attacking cities and shaking kingdoms. Maybe it was a mix of both: natural disasters, migrations, economic collapse, and political unrest, all happening at once. What makes this reset particularly fascinating is its scale. Unlike previous collapses, which were usually local, the Bronze Age collapse affected multiple civilizations over hundreds of miles. Suddenly, knowledge was lost. Writing disappeared in some regions. Skills like building monumental palaces, forging bronze weapons, and sophisticated administration were forgotten. Europe and parts of the Near East entered what some call a Dark Age, though life, of course, continued for ordinary people. For the Mycenaeans, the collapse meant that their palaces were burned and abandoned. Cities like Tiryns, Pylos, and Mycenae were no longer centers of power. Kings vanished, scribes stopped writing, and the elaborate network of roads and storage facilities was left to crumble. People still farmed and lived in villages, but the age of monumental architecture and expansive bureaucracy ended. It would take centuries before Greece rose again, slowly, in a very different form. The Hittites faced a similar fate. Their empire, which had dominated Anatolia and parts of Syria, vanished. Kings disappeared, capital cities were destroyed, and records stopped. Archaeologists today still wonder how such a powerful kingdom could collapse so completely. Even their temples, carefully carved and maintained, fell into ruin. Some speculate earthquakes and internal rebellion played a role, but the exact reasons remain unclear. Meanwhile, Egypt endured, but not without scars. Pharaohs during the New Kingdom faced invasions, economic troubles, and famine. The once stable world along the Nile showed cracks. Temples and monuments were maintained, but trade slowed. Egypt's contacts with its neighbors faltered, and foreign influence grew. Even the mighty river could not save every city. The collapse affected ordinary life as well. People who had lived in cities were forced to move to the countryside. They learned to farm differently, relying less on imported goods. Villages became self-sufficient, smaller, quieter. Life slowed. Perhaps children played along empty roads where merchants had once carried goods. Perhaps farmers whispered old stories about kings and palaces, tales that would later form myths. Civilization hadn't vanished entirely, but it had been reset, pared down to its essentials. It is interesting to imagine what it felt like to live through this time. One day, your city is bustling with traders, scribes, and craftsmen. The next, walls are charred, roofs collapsed, and distant neighbors vanished. Food is scarce, strangers wander through, and nobody knows what tomorrow will bring. And yet, humans persisted. They adapted. They planted crops, raised families, told stories, and remembered. Even when the palaces were gone, people carried the memory of their old world. Some scholars suggest that this period of collapse was necessary for the next stages of human civilization. With old powers gone, new societies could emerge, learn from previous mistakes, and develop new systems of governance, trade, and culture. In a strange way, destruction cleared the path for innovation. A reset, yes, but not the end. By the time the centuries passed, Greece would rise again with city-states like Athens and Sparta. Anatolia would see new kingdoms and empires. And Egypt, though weakened, would experience periods of revival, learning lessons from the chaos surrounding it. What once fell would influence what was rebuilt, just as footprints in the sand guide travelers who come later. Even today, the Bronze Age collapse reminds us of the fragility of civilization. Cities, trade networks, and political systems may seem permanent, but nature, migration, and human unpredictability can undo them. And yet, resilience is equally human. We rebuild, adapt, and continue, carrying lessons from the past like precious cargo. So, imagine walking through a city of the Bronze Age just before collapse. Merchants call out across the streets, children run laughing between palace walls, scribes press styluses into clay tablets, and musicians play simple tunes. Then imagine the quiet after the fall, roads empty, workshops abandoned, fires reduced to ash. Still, life continues quietly in villages and farms. People survive, remember, and eventually rebuild. Civilization may pause, but it does not vanish completely. Take a deep breath. Picture the smoke from burned palaces drifting into the sky. Hear the river, the wind, the distant clatter of pots in abandoned homes. Imagine the stories whispered around fires in villages far from the ruined cities. And know that even in collapse, humanity endures, quietly carrying knowledge, culture, and hope forward into the future. Next, we will journey to the Americas and the jungles of Central America, where the Maya civilization rose, flourished, and eventually faded in its own mysterious way. But for now, let the echoes of ancient cities settle in your mind, calm and soft, like the river of time itself. Deep in the dense jungles of Central America, a civilization once thrived, one of the most mysterious the world has ever seen. Cities rose like islands among the trees. Stone pyramids pointed toward the sky, and plazas echoed with the footsteps of people who lived, loved, and dreamed in ways we can only imagine today. This was the Maya civilization. Unlike Sumer or Egypt, the Maya did not rise along a single river. Their cities were scattered across present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. Each city was unique, but all shared a deep fascination with time, the stars, and the patterns of the heavens. Astronomy was not just a hobby, it guided planting, ritual, and governance. They were, in a sense, timekeepers, humans measuring their lives against the endless sky. The Maya built monumental architecture. Temples, palaces, ball courts, and observatories. Every stone carved carefully. Every city meticulously planned. They had roads connecting cities, marketplaces bustling with trade, and intricate water systems to survive the often unpredictable rain. They were skilled farmers, growing maize, beans, and squash, often in raised fields and terraces. They knew their land intimately, balancing survival with beauty. But the Maya also had something rare: writing. Hieroglyphs covered temples and stelae, telling stories of kings, gods, battles, and events. They tracked history, rituals, and even astronomical events with incredible precision. Yet, even with such sophistication, the Maya world would eventually face trials that no pyramid could withstand. One of the most puzzling things about the Maya is how some cities were suddenly abandoned. By the 9th century CE, cities in the southern lowlands, places like Tikal and Köpen, were largely deserted. Temples stood, statues remained, but the streets were quiet. Fields went fallow. Scholars call this the classic Maya collapse. It wasn't one single event. There was no invasion that burned every city at once. It was gradual, like a candle flickering out over decades. What caused it? There are many theories. Climate change played a role. Prolonged droughts that starved crops. Overpopulation stressed resources. Political instability led to conflicts between cities. Trade networks broke down. Perhaps it was all of these combined, like a perfect storm of challenges no civilization could fully withstand. Yet even in collapse, life continued elsewhere. Northern Maya cities, like Chichen Itza, thrived for centuries after the southern cities were abandoned. Culture persisted, knowledge endured, and the people adapted. Civilization didn't vanish. It shifted, showing that even when societies falter, human resilience quietly carries them forward. It's fascinating to imagine the last days of these southern cities. Children probably ran along temple steps, laughing. Farmers tilled the soil in nearby fields. Priests recited prayers in plazas. And then, slowly, the crowds thinned. Temples fell silent. Roads grew over with vines. Nature reclaimed what people had built. Yet, the stones remembered. The carvings survived, patiently waiting for explorers and archaeologists to rediscover them centuries later. The Maya also remind us that knowledge isn't always permanent. When Europeans arrived centuries later, many Maya books, codices, were destroyed. Only a handful survived. Some knowledge was lost forever, though fragments remain in stories, traditions, and archaeology. Civilization, even when brilliant, can be fragile. Still, the Maya left behind an incredible legacy. Their calendars, mathematics, art, and architecture influenced subsequent generations. They showed that humans could measure the stars, plan cities, govern large populations, and create art that would inspire thousands of years later. Even in areas where their cities vanished, their descendants survived, carrying memory and tradition forward in subtle ways. Imagine walking through a Maya city at its height. Markets full of color and noise. Priests performing ceremonies atop pyramids. Ballplayers competing in courts as crowds cheer. Farmers tending crops outside city walls. Artisans crafting pottery and jewelry. The air filled with chatter, music, and the scent of maize roasting. Then imagine the quiet that follows. Buildings slowly overtaken by jungle. Roads swallowed by roots. Yet, hidden in stone carvings and oral stories, the heartbeat of civilization continues. The Maya also remind us something important. Collapse is not always a failure. Sometimes, it is a transformation. Life adapts. Knowledge migrates. Culture evolves. What seems lost may persist quietly in another form, waiting for rediscovery. Civilizations are not just walls and temples, they are memory, creativity, and the stories people carry forward. Take a slow breath. Picture the warm sun filtering through jungle leaves, the distant sound of water moving along rivers, the soft rustle of leaves as children run through abandoned plazas. Think of the wisdom that survived, quietly passing from one generation to another. Even when cities fall, the human spirit endures, ready to rise again. As you imagine this, remember that the Maya were not unique in collapse. Many civilizations before and after them faced resets, each leaving behind clues, whispers, and lessons for those who come after. They show us that even in silence, humanity remembers. Even in absence, there is presence. And sometimes, the quietest civilizations leave the loudest echoes for us to find. Next, our journey will take us to the Roman Empire, where an entire world of roads, law, and cities faced its own dramatic transformations. But for now, rest. Let the whispers of the Maya carry you gently, as the jungle reclaims its secrets, and the stars shine patiently above, just as they did for thousands of years. The Roman Empire stretched across continents, a world of roads, cities, and laws so organized that parts of it still influence us today. For centuries, Rome seemed unstoppable. Soldiers marched in perfect lines, governors kept distant provinces in check, and trade moved like clockwork from Britain to Egypt. Palaces gleamed. Temples towered. And, of course, the Romans built public baths because everyone needs a good soak now and then. But even the mightiest empires have limits. Over time, cracks appeared. The borders were too long to defend. Communication took weeks or months. Corruption crept in. Emperors came and went, some wise, some absurd. One even tried to make his horse a consul, probably because he was tired of human politics. Economic strain grew as taxes rose to support armies and infrastructure. Farms declined. Inflation hit. And outside the borders, pressure from migrating peoples increased. Tribes such as the Goths, Vandals, and Huns moved closer and closer. Some wanted land, some wanted riches, some just wanted to avoid someone else. The empire faced problems on multiple fronts, all at once. By the 3rd century CE, Rome faced its first real shakeups. Civil wars, plagues, and weak emperors made life unpredictable. People worried about taxes, safety, and survival. Cities once full of traders, artisans, and farmers became quieter. The empire seemed to falter, though it still held together in some form. The 4th and 5th centuries brought more dramatic changes. The Western Roman Empire, centered on Rome itself, began to crumble. In 410 CE, the Visigoths sacked Rome. The city that had once ruled much of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East was breached. Later, the Vandals did the same. Palaces were looted. Temples fell silent. Roads and aqueducts, once marvels of engineering, began to decay. Life for ordinary people changed dramatically. Farmers struggled to produce enough food. Towns lost their markets. Local rulers gained power as central authority weakened. The carefully organized empire of law and order fractured into smaller kingdoms. What had once seemed eternal was now fragile. Yet, collapse was not total. The Eastern Roman Empire, known later as Byzantium, survived for nearly 1,000 more years. Knowledge, traditions, and culture continued to flow there. Rome's language, law, and religion spread further, influencing peoples even outside its borders. In this sense, the empire never fully vanished. It transformed. The fall of Rome is a lesson in the complexity of resets. Civilization does not end neatly. It slows, shifts, and adapts. The roads, walls, and aqueducts may crumble, but ideas, languages, and culture persist. Even in decay, humans carry memory forward. They rebuild, sometimes in ways unrecognizable from the old, but always connected to it. Think of a Roman city at its peak. Markets crowded with people, merchants calling out their goods, children running along stone streets. Soldiers march to keep order. Priests perform rituals in temples. Now, imagine that same city decades later. Streets half empty, buildings collapsing, roofs leaking, walls covered in ivy. Yet life continues. Farmers work outside, local leaders make decisions, families tell stories of the glory days. Civilization adapts to survive, even if it is quieter, simpler, and different. The Roman experience shows that collapse is rarely sudden. It happens over decades or even centuries. A city may be strong one generation and weakened the next. People adjust to new realities. The Western Roman Empire ended politically in 476 CE when the last emperor was deposed, but the world did not end. Roads still connected towns. The Mediterranean still carried ships. The culture lived on in new kingdoms. And so, the Roman Empire is a model of both fragility and endurance. It reminds us that even the most powerful systems are vulnerable to pressure from within and without. Leadership, economics, climate, migration, all can influence the rise or fall of civilization. But it also shows that knowledge and culture can outlast political structures, carrying lessons forward to future generations. Take a slow breath. Imagine walking along the Forum at sunset. Hear distant voices echoing between columns. Smell the bread baking in the market. Picture the aqueducts carrying water into the city, the temples gleaming in the late light. And then, picture decades later, the same streets empty, the buildings worn, the city quiet, yet still standing in memory. Life persists. Humanity adapts. Civilization evolves. The Romans also teach a subtle lesson about legacy. Roads, laws, literature, architecture, and governance did not disappear with the fall. They were inherited, modified, and adopted by those who followed. Europe's Middle Ages were shaped by what Rome left behind. In that sense, the empire never truly ended. It shifted, transformed, and informed the next wave of civilization. As you lie back and breathe, picture the grandeur and quiet of Rome together. Imagine both the height and the slow decline. Listen for the faint echoes of voices long gone, the whispers of ideas that survived. Even when empires fall, the human story continues. Knowledge travels. Culture persists. And, quietly, civilization rises again, somewhere else, in another form. Next, we will explore the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire and the medieval civilizations that preserved fragments of Rome's legacy. But for now, let your mind drift along Roman roads and aqueducts, imagining the flow of time, the rise and fall, and the gentle persistence of human life. After the Western Roman Empire fell, a new world slowly emerged. In the East, the Byzantine Empire carried the flame of Rome. Its capital, Constantinople, stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, a city of walls, domes, and golden mosaics. It became a beacon of culture, learning, and trade, even as much of the Western Mediterranean turned into smaller, fragmented kingdoms. The Byzantines inherited Roman laws, armies, and administration. They preserved books, philosophies, and records that might have otherwise vanished. Their libraries became treasure chests of human knowledge. Scholars copied texts on parchment, painstakingly reproducing works of literature, science, and mathematics. Without them, many ideas from ancient Greece and Rome might have been lost forever. Life in Constantinople was rich and varied. Markets overflowed with spices, silks, and jewelry from faraway lands. Citizens gathered in the hippodrome to watch chariot races and cheer for their favorite teams. Churches glimmered with gold and glass mosaics, while scholars debated philosophy and theology. It was a world that thrived, even as Western Europe struggled with political instability and frequent invasions. Yet the Byzantine Empire faced challenges too. Wars with Persians, Arabs, and later Turks tested its strength. Plagues occasionally swept through the city, taking lives and disrupting trade. Internal power struggles and political intrigue were constant, sometimes absurd, as emperors were overthrown by family members or generals. And always looming was the reminder that nothing lasts forever, no matter how strong the walls or clever the leaders. Despite these pressures, the Byzantines preserved knowledge. Mathematics, medicine, history, and law were written down, studied, and taught. They kept alive the idea of an organized, literate society in a time when many regions had lost the ability to read and write. This preservation of knowledge acted as a bridge, connecting the classical world of Greece and Rome to later European civilizations. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, smaller kingdoms were slowly rising from the chaos left by Rome. Frankish kings, Anglo-Saxon lords, and Italian city-states worked to rebuild governance, trade, and culture. Life was slower, simpler, and often harsher than in Byzantium, but seeds were being planted. Monasteries became centers of learning, copying texts and teaching new generations. Knowledge, like a quiet river, flowed even through regions that had been cut off from the old imperial systems. One of the most interesting lessons from this period is how civilization survives, even in parts. While some regions collapsed, others preserved ideas, and these ideas later spread. Constantinople, monasteries, and scholars acted like memory keepers, ensuring that humanity did not start completely over each time a society fell. Knowledge became more durable than buildings, more lasting than walls or armies. Imagine a Byzantine scholar sitting in a dimly lit room, copying a text about medicine or philosophy. Outside, merchants trade in the streets, children play in the courtyards, and priests chant in churches. Somewhere else in Europe, a monk in a cold stone monastery copies the same or similar texts, keeping a fragile thread of human knowledge alive. Life continues quietly, persistently, even in uncertainty. Civilization doesn't vanish. It adapts, waits, and grows again. The Byzantine Empire also shows that cultural identity and memory can survive political collapse. Even when cities were conquered, empires shrank, or rulers changed, the knowledge and traditions remained. Art, architecture, law, and education endured. People continued to build, teach, trade, and tell stories. Civilization, at its core, is carried by humans, not walls or kings. Take a slow breath. Picture the streets of Constantinople filled with traders, scholars, and citizens. Hear the distant chariot wheels, the soft chant of prayers, the hum of conversation in markets. Imagine the libraries stacked high with scrolls and books. Now imagine the same city centuries later, under siege or in decline. The walls are scarred, some streets empty, but the knowledge, the ideas, the culture, these survive. Civilization adapts. It waits for the right moment to flourish again. By preserving what they could, the Byzantines ensured that the wisdom of the past was not lost. When Europe eventually entered the Renaissance, texts preserved in Byzantine and monastic libraries fueled the revival of art, science, and thought. The continuity of knowledge, allowed new civilizations to rise on the foundation of the old. And so, this chapter of history reminds us that resets are rarely total. Some societies collapse completely, while others preserve, adapt, and teach. The Byzantine Empire and the European monasteries acted as guardians of human memory, bridging gaps between eras. They show that civilization is not just about monuments or empires, it is about the quiet persistence of learning, culture, and human curiosity. As you rest, picture the glow of oil lamps in Byzantine libraries, the whisper of monks copying texts, the faint sound of merchants trading across courtyards. Imagine the knowledge being carried across generations, surviving invasions, plagues, and time itself. Civilization may pause, cities may fall, but the human story continues, patiently, quietly, and resiliently. Next, we will travel to the great civilizations of China, where dynasties rose, fell, and rebuilt, leaving behind inventions, philosophies, and stories that continue to influence the world today. For now, let the calm persistence of the Byzantine world and medieval Europe carry you gently into a restful state, imagining human knowledge as a river flowing steadily through the centuries. China's rivers have always been more than water. They are life itself. The Yellow River, the Yangtze, and countless smaller streams shaped the land and the people who lived along them. Early farmers settled these fertile valleys, planting millet, rice, and vegetables. Villages grew. Skills were passed from parent to child. And slowly, a civilization emerged, remarkable in both scope and endurance. Unlike many other early civilizations, China experienced repeated cycles of rise, fall, and rebirth. Dynasties ruled, then fell. New ones replaced them, often claiming the mandate of heaven, the divine right to govern. If a ruler was cruel, lazy, or incompetent, it was said that heaven withdrew its support, and chaos followed. Floods, famines, rebellions, or invasions often marked the transition. People, of course, still had to eat and survive in the meantime, regardless of which dynasty claimed divine favor. The first major dynasties, like the Shang and Zhou, laid the foundations of Chinese civilization. They built cities, developed writing on oracle bones, and created bronze weapons and tools. They studied the stars, recorded history, and codified laws. Life was complex and structured. Farmers grew food, artisans crafted pottery, and rulers built palaces. Music, poetry, and ritual played important roles, reminding people of order in a vast and sometimes chaotic world. But no dynasty lasted forever. The Zhou eventually lost power, fragmented into smaller kingdoms, and a period of warfare and instability began. Yet this era also produced philosophers who shaped human thought for millennia. Confucius taught ethics, relationships, and social harmony. Laozi offered ideas of balance and the natural flow of life. Even in political collapse, intellectual and cultural growth continued. Civilization adapted, finding new ways to survive. The cycle repeated again and again. The Qin dynasty unified China, built roads and the first version of the Great Wall, and standardized currency and writing. But after only a few decades, it fell. The Han dynasty followed, bringing stability, trade along the Silk Road, and advancements in science, medicine, and technology. When the Han weakened, periods of division returned, yet culture, learning, and identity persisted through it all. This pattern of rise, fall, and rebirth illustrates something important. Civilization does not always end with the collapse of a dynasty. Knowledge, traditions, inventions, and culture can survive political chaos. People continue to farm, trade, and tell stories. Scholars write and copy texts. Artisans create. Humanity finds a way to keep going, even when rulers fail or cities fall. China also reminds us of resilience on a large scale. Inventions like paper, the compass, silk, and gunpowder emerged during periods of relative stability, but their influence often survived dynastic turmoil. Even when kingdoms fought and cities burned, ideas traveled, spreading knowledge across generations and borders. Civilization, in this sense, is not only buildings or armies. It is creativity, memory, and adaptation. Picture a Han city at its height. Streets lined with merchants selling silk and spices, scholars teaching in courtyards, farmers bringing their goods from nearby fields. Music drifts from a temple. Children play in alleys. Now imagine the dynasty weakening, floods striking the fields, political unrest spreading. Some roads become empty, marketplaces quiet, palaces crumble. Yet life continues. Families endure, farmers sow crops, scholars copy texts. Civilization adapts, transforms, and survives. The Chinese experience teaches another subtle lesson. Resilience can be cultural as well as political. Language, philosophy, and writing outlast rulers. Even if a dynasty falls, people remember, learn, and rebuild. Culture acts as a bridge across time, connecting past, present, and future. The mandate of heaven may pass from ruler to ruler, but the ideas, innovations, and social structures persist. Take a slow breath. Imagine the rivers flowing steadily through plains and mountains. Hear the quiet chatter of villagers, the clatter of pots, and the soft music from a temple. Picture scholars copying texts, farmers tending rice paddies, and artisans shaping bronze or clay. Time passes, dynasties rise and fall, but the flow of knowledge and human ingenuity continues, quietly, like the river itself. China's story also shows that resets do not erase humanity. Even after famine, rebellion, or invasion, people rebuild cities, grow food, and continue to learn. Civilization is resilient, not because it is immune to collapse, but because humans persist. They carry memory forward, adapt to new conditions, and keep creating. And so, as you rest, imagine the rise and fall of dynasties across centuries. See the cities, hear the markets, feel the rivers, and watch as life continues quietly even through chaos. Civilization endures not only in monuments or empires but in the ongoing rhythm of human life, in work, art, thought, and stories passed from one generation to the next. Next, our journey will explore the Islamic Golden Age, where knowledge, trade, and innovation flourished after previous civilizations had reset elsewhere. But for now, let the calm rhythm of Chinese rivers, dynasties, and human perseverance carry you gently into sleep, imagining the flow of time as continuous, patient, and enduring. After the fall of earlier empires and civilizations, a new era began in the Middle East. The Islamic Golden Age stretched roughly from the 8th to the 14th century, a time when knowledge, trade, and culture flourished in ways that would influence the world for centuries. Cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba became hubs of learning, innovation, and human creativity. The story of this era begins with scholars, merchants, and thinkers who believed in the power of knowledge. They preserved and translated works from Greece, Rome, Persia, and India, texts on medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Imagine libraries filled with scrolls, scholars hunched over ink-stained desks, copying and debating ideas, sometimes working late into the night by candlelight. Their goal was simple but profound: to understand the world, to preserve knowledge, and to share it. Trade also played a crucial role. Caravan routes connected cities across deserts and mountains. Merchants brought silk, spices, paper, and precious metals. Ideas traveled along with goods. Astronomy charts, algebraic equations, and medical knowledge crossed deserts and seas, influencing people far beyond the cities where they originated. Civilization was not just surviving, it was expanding, growing, and connecting previously distant regions. Medicine flourished. Doctors studied the human body, wrote treatises, and established hospitals. Algebra was developed, allowing humans to calculate, measure, and predict with precision. Optics, astronomy, and chemistry advanced rapidly. Cities hummed with intellectual energy, even as the outside world faced its own political and social challenges. This era reminds us that resets do not always erase knowledge. While Europe was entering the early Middle Ages, the Islamic world was preserving and expanding the wisdom of previous civilizations. Greek philosophy, Roman engineering, Indian mathematics, none of it was lost. It was translated, adapted, and improved upon. Civilization had found a way to bridge the gaps left by earlier collapses. Art and architecture also flourished. Mosques and palaces were adorned with intricate mosaics and geometric patterns. Calligraphy became an art form, elevating words to beauty. Music, poetry, and literature thrived. Even daily life reflected order, creativity, and elegance. People lived, worked, and dreamed in cities that were vibrant, connected, and deeply aware of their place in history. But like all civilizations, the Golden Age faced challenges. Political fragmentation, invasions, and later, the Mongol conquests disrupted cities and trade. Baghdad, once the heart of learning, was sacked in 1258. Libraries were burned, treasures lost, and scholars scattered. Yet, much knowledge survived, carried by travelers, merchants, and other cities. Ideas endured even when institutions fell. Take a moment to imagine Baghdad at its height. The Tigris River glistening in the sun, bustling markets filled with merchants, scholars debating in courtyards, the scent of spices in the air. Children playing, artists painting, poets reciting verses. Now imagine the same city after an invasion, streets quieter, buildings damaged, libraries partially destroyed. And yet, knowledge persisted. Scholars fled to other cities, texts survived in copies, and the spirit of learning continued. Civilization adapts, even after trauma. The Islamic Golden Age shows us another important lesson. Civilizations can reset and rebuild in entirely new ways. Knowledge preserved from earlier societies was combined with new discoveries. Trade, education, and art created networks that spread ideas far beyond borders. Culture and memory became resilient forces, ensuring continuity even when political structures faltered. This period also reminds us of human curiosity and ingenuity. Even after previous civilizations had collapsed or been disrupted, humans continued to ask questions, explore, and create. They experimented with medicine, engineered solutions to practical problems, calculated the stars, and documented their discoveries for future generations. Civilization is not just survival, it is exploration, curiosity, and creativity that endure beyond collapse. Take a slow breath. Picture scholars copying texts, merchants walking along dusty trade routes, children running past market stalls, and the hum of conversation in courtyards. Imagine the glow of oil lamps in libraries as knowledge is preserved and expanded. Even if cities faced attacks, the ideas they produced traveled, adapted, and influenced future generations. Civilization continues quietly, patiently, and persistently. As you rest, think of the Golden Age as a bridge connecting lost knowledge from the ancient world to the future. Mathematics, medicine, literature, and art were preserved, enhanced, and carried forward. Even when empires fall, human ingenuity endures. Every collapse contains seeds for new growth, if humans continue to think, learn, and create. Next, we will journey to medieval Europe, where knowledge from the Islamic world and surviving classical texts helped spark a slow but steady recovery that would eventually lead to the Renaissance. But for now, let the calm energy of the Golden Age carry you gently, imagining streets filled with scholars, markets, and lantern-lit libraries, a world where human curiosity flows steadily through time. The world grew bigger once humans set sail across oceans. Ships left familiar harbors, carrying explorers, merchants, and adventurers into unknown waters. The age of exploration, from the 15th to the 17th centuries, connected continents in ways that had never happened before. Trade, knowledge, and ideas flowed across oceans, creating a global network of civilization, but also new challenges and resets. Europeans sailed west to reach Asia, only to discover lands they had never imagined. The Americas, with their vast forests, mountains, and rivers, met the eyes of newcomers. Africa's coasts became ports of trade, both of goods and, tragically, humans. Life was changing everywhere, and civilizations across the globe were being reshaped, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. Trade exploded. Spices, silver, silk, and sugar traveled great distances. Cities like Lisbon, Seville, and Amsterdam grew rich and bustling. Knowledge traveled too. Maps, scientific observations, and cultural ideas spread from port to port. Information flowed faster than ever before. Civilization became interconnected on a scale never seen in history. But exploration also brought disruption. Indigenous populations in the Americas faced diseases brought by newcomers, sometimes wiping out entire communities. Local systems of government, trade, and culture were disrupted or destroyed. Empires in the Americas, like the Aztecs and Incas, fell to relatively small numbers of invaders equipped with guns, horses, and new strategies. Civilizations that had thrived for centuries were reset, violently and abruptly. In Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, connections brought both opportunities and challenges. Trade networks expanded. Knowledge spread. But new empires and merchants often imposed foreign systems, disrupting local traditions. Civilization adapted, sometimes blending old ways with new, sometimes suffering tremendous loss. Resets, in this global age, were both cultural and political. Technology played a crucial role. Ships, compasses, and navigational tools allowed people to travel farther than ever. Knowledge of winds, currents, and astronomy guided explorers across oceans. Maps were drawn, refined, and shared. The accumulation of practical knowledge was faster than in any previous era. Civilization, in this sense, was not just surviving. It was rapidly accelerating and connecting. Imagine standing on the deck of a wooden ship, wind in your hair, the sea stretching endlessly. Merchants check their cargo of spices and silk. Sailors adjust the sails. Scholars and navigators plot the course. Every day brings new challenges, storms, unknown waters, and strange lands. Yet the human drive to explore persists, creating new connections and reshaping the world. Meanwhile, knowledge from the Islamic Golden Age, classical Europe, and Asia was carried along these routes. Medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and art traveled across continents. Civilizations that had been separated for centuries suddenly influenced one another. Ideas mixed, creating new systems of knowledge, trade, and culture. Even civilizations that faced destruction left traces of learning and culture for the newcomers to encounter. The age of exploration shows that civilization can expand and reset simultaneously. Empires collapse, populations are displaced, and cultures change. Yet knowledge, creativity, and adaptability persist. Humanity finds ways to survive, rebuild, and integrate lessons from the past. Civilization is dynamic, moving like a tide across the globe, connecting and reshaping societies in unexpected ways. Take a slow breath. Picture the bustling ports, the crowded markets, the clatter of goods being loaded and unloaded. Imagine explorers navigating strange coasts, indigenous peoples observing from rivers and forests, and merchants recording every detail. Civilization moves forward, connecting distant lands, preserving knowledge, and adapting to new challenges. Even when disruption is sudden and dramatic, life continues. This period also teaches a subtle lesson. Global connection accelerates both creativity and collapse. Civilizations are more intertwined than ever. What happens in one part of the world can ripple across oceans and continents. Knowledge spreads, trade thrives, and cultures influence one another. But vulnerability increases too. Resets can be sudden, widespread, and unpredictable. Yet humanity persists. Ideas, technologies, and cultural practices survive even when empires fall. Civilization adapts, blending old and new, creating something different yet connected to the past. Exploration, in its complexity, reminds us that resets are not the end. They are moments in the ongoing flow of human history, challenges that inspire adaptation, learning, and growth. As you rest, picture a ship cutting through waves, a new land appearing on the horizon, the smell of salt in the air. Hear the quiet hum of sailors, the chatter of merchants, and the whispers of navigators charting unknown waters. Life continues, civilization adapts, and knowledge persists across oceans and generations. Next, our journey will explore the Industrial Revolution, a reset driven not by conquest or collapse, but by human invention, machines, and new ways of living. But for now, let the vast oceans, distant lands, and quiet persistence of human exploration carry you gently into sleep, imagining civilization as a river that flows, connects, and endures across time. The world changed quietly at first, then quickly. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the Industrial Revolution began. Factories, steam engines, and new machines reshaped how people lived, worked, and thought. Civilization had not fallen in the usual sense, but it was being reset, transformed by invention, industry, and new ways of connecting the world. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people lived and worked on farms, in villages, or small towns. Life followed the rhythm of the sun, the seasons, and the soil. Tools were simple. Work was manual. Travel was slow. Communication took days or weeks. And then, machines appeared, and everything began to move faster. Factories grew in towns and cities. Steam engines powered textile mills, ironworks, and transportation. Trains and ships carried people and goods faster than ever. Cities expanded, streets filled with workers, and smoke rose from chimneys. Life accelerated. Civilization was reshaping itself not through war or invasion, but through technology, invention, and new ways of organizing society. This era was exciting but chaotic. Cities grew faster than infrastructure. People moved from the countryside to work in factories. Crowded streets, small apartments, and long working hours became the new normal. Yet, innovation continued. Electricity, telegraphs, and improved medicine changed daily life. Knowledge spread more quickly than ever before. Civilization was adapting to a new reality, a reset by machines rather than armies. The Industrial Revolution also connected the world more tightly. Trade, communication, and transportation expanded globally. Cotton from India, coal from Britain, iron from Europe, and manufactured goods from factories created a network of interdependence. Ideas, inventions, and knowledge traveled with the goods. Civilization became both faster and more complex, resilient in some ways, fragile in others. Imagine walking through an industrial city for the first time. The hum of machinery, the hiss of steam engines, the chatter of workers, and the smell of coal in the air. Streets crowded with carts, children running, merchants shouting. Life was noisy, fast, and relentless. Yet at the same time, curiosity, innovation, and human ingenuity thrived. Civilization was moving forward, even if unevenly, reshaping itself around machines and technology. This transformation reminds us that resets can come in many forms. Earlier, civilizations were reset by climate, invasions, or collapse. Now, the world was being reset by human invention, economic change, and population movement. The patterns of daily life, work, and social organization were being rewritten. Civilization adapts not only to survival threats but also to its own creativity. Education and knowledge grew rapidly during this time. Literacy increased. Scientific discoveries and engineering advances spread widely. Libraries, universities, and technical schools trained people in new skills. The human mind, like civilization itself, adapted to the new pace, learning to work with machines and think differently about the world. Yet, the Industrial Revolution also revealed the fragility of progress. Harsh working conditions, child labor, pollution, and social inequality showed that transformation could be both brilliant and dangerous. Resets are rarely perfect. Civilization may advance technologically, but humans must still navigate the consequences. Adaptation is essential, not just innovation. Take a slow breath. Imagine the hiss of steam, the rhythmic clatter of machinery, the glow of molten metal in a foundry, and the smell of coal in the air. Picture people working, learning, building, inventing. Life is moving faster, but civilization is persisting, adapting, and growing. Even when society changes rapidly, human curiosity, knowledge, and creativity endure. The Industrial Revolution also reminds us that progress is a form of continuity. Knowledge from previous eras, from Byzantium, medieval Europe, China, and the Islamic world, fueled invention. Civilizations that had survived collapses and resets contributed ideas, techniques, and inspiration. Humanity's memory, preserved over millennia, powered the engines of change. As you rest, imagine the world slowly transforming, streets and cities buzzing with energy, factories humming, railways stretching across continents, and ideas traveling along new routes. Civilization is both fragile and persistent. Machines, inventions, and human determination shape the future, but the resilience of knowledge and culture ensures continuity. Civilization adapts and survives, quietly, patiently, and ingeniously. Next, we will explore the modern era, where technology, global conflict, and rapid change create new challenges, resets, and transformations for humanity. But for now, Let the steady rhythm of industrial progress carry you gently, imagining smoke rising against the dawn, steam engines hissing softly, and civilization moving forward, one invention at a time. The modern era arrived with speed and intensity. Technology, politics, and global connections transformed life more quickly than ever before. Civilizations were no longer isolated. News, ideas, and inventions traveled instantly compared to previous centuries. With each new discovery, society adapted, reshaped, and sometimes reset itself in surprising ways. The 20th century alone saw incredible advances: electricity, automobiles, airplanes, radio, television, and eventually computers. People could communicate across continents in minutes, travel across oceans in hours, and process information faster than anyone could imagine a few generations earlier. Civilization was accelerating, but with rapid change came new risks and disruptions. Global conflicts, including 2 world wars, created dramatic resets. Cities were destroyed, populations displaced, and economies collapsed. Millions of lives were affected, entire societies transformed. Yet even in destruction, humans rebuilt. Nations rose from ruins, cities were reconstructed, and international organizations were created to preserve peace and cooperation. Civilization adapted, not erased, carrying lessons from catastrophe forward. The modern era also showed how interconnected humanity had become. A financial crisis in one part of the world could ripple across continents. Diseases could spread quickly across borders. Innovations in one country could transform life in another almost immediately. Civilization became fragile and resilient at the same time, a delicate balance of connection, memory, and adaptation. Take a moment to imagine a city in the early 20th century. Streetcars clatter over rails. Factories hum with machines. Children run to school, newspapers in hand. Electricity illuminates streets after dark. People read, write, invent, and dream, even as distant wars and conflicts stir uncertainty. Life continues, quietly persistent, adapting to the rhythm of a rapidly changing world. Science and technology became both a source of power and a reminder of responsibility. Nuclear energy, computers, and telecommunications transformed life, but also carried risks. Civilization learned that knowledge can preserve or destroy, depending on how it is used. The lesson of human history is clear: progress and resilience must go hand in hand. Education and culture flourished alongside technology. Schools, universities, museums, and libraries preserved knowledge while training new generations. Ideas from past civilizations, mathematics from the Islamic world, philosophy from Greece, engineering from Rome and China, combined with modern innovations to push humanity forward. Knowledge persisted, even in times of upheaval. Global cooperation also became more important than ever. Countries collaborated on space exploration, scientific research, and disease prevention. Civilizations that had once been isolated or in conflict now shared knowledge, technology, and culture at an unprecedented pace. The resets of previous eras informed the modern world, helping humans survive crises and adapt to change. Imagine the quiet moments in a modern city: a library filled with books and computers, a classroom where children learn about history, science, and art, a scientist recording experiments in a laboratory. Even amidst noise, traffic, and industrial hum, the continuity of civilization persists. Knowledge flows, creativity thrives, and humanity continues to adapt. Civilization is not erased by challenges, it is redefined and reshaped. The modern era reminds us that resets can be sudden, slow, or invisible. Wars, technological revolutions, environmental changes, and pandemics all act as forces that reshape society. Yet, the persistence of human ingenuity, curiosity, and memory ensures that civilization survives. We carry the lessons of past collapses, the knowledge of previous generations, and the innovations of today into the future. Take a slow breath. Picture the glowing lights of a city at night, the quiet hum of technology, the footsteps of people walking home, and the soft murmur of distant conversation. Civilization continues, quietly adapting, learning, and building. Even in uncertainty, humanity persists, carrying memory, culture, and knowledge forward. As you rest, think of the modern era as a continuation of countless previous chapters. Each collapse, reset, and transformation has left its mark. Civilization has endured floods, wars, invasions, plagues, and technological revolutions. Knowledge, culture, and human creativity have persisted, quietly connecting past, present, and future. Next, we will explore the potential future of civilization and whether humans might face another reset, this time by climate, technology, or other forces we have yet to fully understand. For now, let the quiet hum of the modern world carry you gently into sleep, imagining humanity moving forward, adapting, and enduring, one day at a time. As we look ahead, the story of civilization continues, but the path becomes less certain. Humans have survived floods, invasions, plagues, and technological upheavals. We have rebuilt, adapted, and innovated. Yet, the future may hold resets of a kind we have never faced before. Challenges that test not just cities or empires, but the planet itself. Climate change is one of the greatest uncertainties. Rising seas, shifting weather patterns, and extreme storms could reshape where and how humans live. Coastal cities may be submerged, crops may fail, and entire ecosystems may change. It is a reminder that, even with modern technology, civilization is still vulnerable to forces greater than ourselves. Yet humans have also shown an incredible capacity to adapt. Innovations in energy, agriculture, and planning offer hope that we can meet these challenges. Technology itself is another form of reset. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and automation could transform work, society, and even human biology. Life as we know it may change in ways we cannot fully imagine today. Just as the Industrial Revolution reshaped the world centuries ago, the technologies of the future may reshape civilization again. The difference is that these changes could be much faster, touching every corner of the globe almost instantly. Globalization adds complexity. Every society is connected, every economy intertwined. What happens in one part of the world can ripple everywhere. This can accelerate innovation, culture, and knowledge, but it also amplifies vulnerability. Resets, whether environmental, technological, or social, now have global consequences. Civilization has never been more connected, nor more dependent on its own resilience. Yet history shows us that humans endure. We have survived floods, invasions, plagues, collapses, and resets. Knowledge, culture, and creativity have always found ways to persist. We rebuild after disaster, learn from mistakes, and innovate in new directions. Civilization is not fragile because humans are weak. It is resilient because humans remember, adapt, and care enough to try again. Imagine a world in the future. Cities glowing with new technology, rivers clean, forests recovering, people exploring space, medicine curing diseases that once seemed impossible, communities adapting to rising seas or shifting climates, knowledge flowing faster than ever, yet grounded in lessons from millennia of human history. Civilization, though challenged, continues, shaped by every choice, every invention, every adaptation. The story of civilization is a rhythm of rise, fall, and rebirth. From the Bronze Age collapse to the fall of Rome, the Mayas' quiet retreat, the preservation of knowledge by Byzantium, the Islamic Golden Age, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, and the modern era, humanity has faced resets again and again. Each time, we have adapted, rebuilt, and carried forward knowledge, culture, and creativity. Future resets may come faster, stranger, and more unpredictable, but the pattern remains. Collapse is rarely total. Even in destruction, life continues. Knowledge survives. People adapt. Civilization is not just monuments, empires, or technology. It is the quiet, persistent creativity, memory, and resilience of humanity itself. Take a slow, deep breath. Picture the Earth from space, blue and green, teeming with life, human civilization flickering like lights across continents. Imagine children running in fields, scientists in laboratories, farmers in terraces, and engineers building new cities. Every life, every effort, every idea is part of the ongoing story of civilization, carrying the past into the future. History has taught us that resets are natural. They challenge, disrupt, and sometimes frighten. But humans endure because we are adaptable, creative, and capable of learning from every collapse. Each reset leaves lessons, sparks innovation, and opens new possibilities. Civilization is alive, not because it never falls, but because it always rises again. As you drift into sleep, imagine the gentle flow of time, carrying cities, empires, knowledge, and people forward. Hear the whispers of the Bronze Age, the footsteps of Rome, the chants of Byzantine scholars, the songs of the Maya, and the hum of modern cities. Civilization is a story of persistence, patience, and quiet resilience, and you are part of its ongoing chapter. So rest, knowing that humanity has faced resets before and will face them again. Knowledge, culture, and creativity are the threads that connect us across time. The future is uncertain, yes, but it is also full of possibility. Civilization endures in the hands, hearts, and minds of people who remember, adapt, and dream. And perhaps, one day, when the next reset comes, whether from nature, technology, or something beyond our imagination, humans will meet it not with fear, but with creativity, courage, and the quiet resilience that has. And as our journey through the rises, falls, and quiet resets of civilization comes to a close, take a deep breath and let it all settle. The stories of empires, cities, and people remind us that even in silence, life continues. Knowledge, creativity, and human resilience persist, carrying civilization forward, one generation at a time. If you enjoyed drifting through history with me tonight, there's more waiting just for you. Here on Curiosity Quest, we explore the forgotten cities, mysterious empires, and untold stories of our past, all in a calm, soothing way, perfect for bedtime. So, if you want to continue this journey through time, make sure to subscribe and click the bell to never miss a story. New videos bring you softly into the worlds of the past, letting you relax, imagine, and drift gently into sleep while discovering history's secrets. And remember, every stone, every scroll, every whisper of the past is waiting to be uncovered, right here, together. Thank you for spending this time with me. Rest well, dream deeply, and we'll meet again in the next story of civilization.